Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really fascinating look into the future, specifically how our medicines are actually made.
Yeah, we're talking about some, well, pretty exciting emerging technologies in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Things like, what were they called? Modular and continuous systems. Sounds quite technical.
It is a bit, but the key thing is they're promising some, serious efficiency boosts.
Okay, efficiency. That always sounds good.
Absolutely.
Huh?
And it's not just potential anymore. We're actually starting to see movement.
So, what are we going to cover?
Well, we'll explore the technology trends behind these shifts, look at the projected impact on the whole pharma world,
Okay.
and we'll even dig into some real-world examples, case studies from the literature to give you a more concrete feel for it.
Great. So, let's sort of unpack this. When you think about developing a new drug, it feels like this incredibly long, um, complex journey, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's way more than just, finding a cool molecule in a lab somewhere.
Right.
That path from just a promising idea, a candidate drug, to something you can actually get at the pharmacy, it's just getting more and more intricate.
Why is that? Just more science.
Well, partly. Pharmaceutical research is constantly pushing boundaries, but also the regulations. They need to ensure safety and effectiveness, and they are, quite rightly, very strict.
Okay, so it sounds like you really need a solid handle on that whole process, the entire journey.
You absolutely do. From the very first spark of an idea, all the way through the manufacturing and the regulatory hoops you have to jump through.
So there's a structure to it.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Mm.
There's a pretty established structured approach. It kicks off with drug discovery, finding those potential medicines.
Uh-huh.
Then you move into preclinical testing that gives you an early idea about safety, how it works,
Like for humans, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then come the clinical trials, testing in people. And finally, if all that goes well, regulatory approval from agencies like the FDA. They look at everything.
And manufacturing.
Yeah.
It's not just tacked on at the end, is it? Feels like it has to be part of it much earlier.
It's completely woven in, totally integral. You can have the most amazing scientific breakthrough,
Yeah.
but if you can't figure out how to actually make the drug reliably, consistently, with the right quality, and in the amounts needed, well, it's never going to help patients.
Right. Makes sense. So overcoming those manufacturing challenges is like fundamental.
It really is. It's how you turn that science into something that actually improves health.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting for me because this is where those new manufacturing technologies you mentioned, where they come in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How can things like modular and continuous systems actually help us get past some of those traditional hurdles?
Yeah.
Well, these innovative approaches, they offer some really compelling answers to old limitations. Take modular systems.
Okay.
It's all about flexibility, scalability. Think of them almost
Yeah.
like Lego bricks for a manufacturing plant. You can combine these standard units, reconfigure them as you need. That means faster setup, easier adaptation for different drugs, or if demand changes.
Right. So you're not stuck with one massive fixed setup.
Precisely. And then there's continuous manufacturing. That's a really big shift from the traditional batch-by-batch method.
How so?
Well, instead of doing step one, stopping, moving everything to step two, stopping again. It's a seamless, uninterrupted flow, like a modern assembly line, really.
Ah, I see. Okay. So what does this actually look like in practice? Are companies doing this now? Are there examples?
Oh, definitely. When you look into the scientific literature, especially journals like Organic Process Research and Development, OPR&D for short,
OPR&D, got it.
you find concrete examples. For instance, there's published work on the pilot scale continuous production of a specific compound, LY2886721.
LY what now? Okay, a specific drug candidate. What did they find? What improved?
Right. So the OPR&D papers detail how using these continuous flow processes for key chemical steps, things like forming an amide bond or a tricky crystallization, it led to really significant advantages. These continuous methods, they allow for much, much finer control over the reaction conditions.
Like temperature and mixing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Temperature, mixing, reaction time. And that tighter control often means you get more of the drug you actually want, higher yield, and fewer unwanted side products,
Yeah.
fewer impurities.
Ah, so it's not just about making more, it's about making it cleaner, higher quality.
Precisely. Quality is huge. And another really cool example from that same research, they optimized a really crucial step in making that LY2886721 molecule. It involved forming something called an aminothiazine ring.
Okay. Sounds complex.
It is. But by using computer modeling together with carefully designed experiments and a continuous flow setup,
Right.
they managed to really fine-tune the process. They squeezed out the maximum yield of the target molecule while really minimizing those pesky impurities.
Wow. So it's like having a much more precise steering wheel for the chemistry.
That's a great analogy. It kind of is. And there's more. The OPR&D literature also talks about developing a continuous method, again at pilot scale, for making one of the starting materials for LY288671.
Okay.
This involves something called packed bed hydrogenolysis. Basically, you flow a solution over a solid catalyst with hydrogen gas. Doing that continuously offered big improvements in safety and efficiency compared to doing it in a big traditional batch reactor, which can be hazardous.
Safety and efficiency, key benefits there. And it's not just this one drug, LY, whatever it was.
No, no, definitely not. The literature, OPR&D included, describes other applications. For example, using continuous flow for something called asymmetric fluorination.
Asymmetric fluorination. Okay, break that down a bit.
Right, so fluorination is adding fluorine atoms. Asymmetric means controlling the 3D shape, the handedness of the molecule, which is often critical for how a drug works. They developed this continuous approach for making new fluoroaminothiophene base C inhibitors.
AC inhibitors, aren't those linked to Alzheimer's research?
They are, yeah. It's a class of drugs being investigated for Alzheimer's. And the key thing here was using continuous flow to get really precise control over that crucial 3D structure.
So it sounds like a really fundamental shift in how the chemistry is being done to make these complex medicines.
It absolutely is. And these shifts, they nearly always involve painstaking optimization of everything, the chemicals, the solvents, the temperature, pressure, even how you crystallize the final drug out,
Right.
all aiming for more efficiency, a purer product, and just a more robust, reliable manufacturing process overall.
So looking beyond these specific chemistry examples, what are the bigger tech trends pushing this forward in pharma?
Well, you've got a few key things coming together. Automation is huge, obviously. Robots and automated systems handling repetitive tasks.
Makes sense.
Digitalization is another massive one, using sophisticated sensors, collecting vast amounts of data, real-time monitoring.
So you know exactly what's happening moment to moment.
Exactly. It gives you deep insights, lets you spot potential issues way faster, and allows for much tighter control over the whole process.
And you mentioned modular design earlier. How does that fit in?
Yeah, modularity is really interesting because it works so well with automation and digitalization. It brings that flexibility and scalability we talked about.
Lego blocks idea.
Right. Imagine a facility built with these standardized, self-contained units. Plug and play, almost. You can connect them, disconnect them, reconfigure them easily depending on the drug or the scale needed.
That sounds like it could make manufacturing much more agile, much more responsive.
That's the idea. It could dramatically cut the time and cost for setting up new lines or just adapting to changes.
And comparing continuous again to the old batch way, the advantages are speed and consistency.
Speed, consistency, and potentially cost effectiveness, yes. Continuous processes can often run for ages with less direct human input. That usually leads to more consistent product quality and can seriously slash production cycle times.
Okay, so if these technologies really take hold, what kind of impacts are we talking about for the pharmaceutical industry overall?
The potential impacts are, well, pretty significant. You could see real downward pressure on drug costs eventually as manufacturing gets leaner,
That would be welcome.
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Supply chains could become much more resilient too. Think about it, that flexibility from modular systems might allow for more localized production, closer to patients.
Less reliance on just a few huge plants somewhere far away.
Possibly, yeah. And maybe the biggest thing, these efficiency gains could ultimately mean faster access to new, innovative medicines for the people who need them.
That's a really powerful outcome, not just cheaper drugs, but getting breakthroughs to patients quicker.
Absolutely. And underpinning all of this, a really critical foundation, is something called quality by design, or QBD.
QBD. Yeah, that rings a bell from other talks. Remind me how it connects here.
So QBD is basically a systematic way to approach drug development and manufacturing. It's all about understanding upfront and then controlling the critical things in the process that can affect the final drug's quality.
So designing the quality in from the start.
Exactly. You're proactively building quality into both the drug itself and the process used to make it. And you absolutely need that deep understanding to successfully implement advanced tech like continuous manufacturing.
Why is that?
Because you can't effectively run a complex, continuous process unless you truly understand those critical parameters, what really drives the product quality, and how each step influences it. You need that fundamental knowledge.
So you have to know exactly how all the ingredients, the steps, the conditions interact, and which bits are absolutely crucial. And QBD gives you that map, essentially.
Precisely. Regulatory agencies like the FDA have really pushed for QBD adoption. Their guidance documents emphasize this science-based, risk-based approach. It just aligns perfectly with the principles behind these advanced manufacturing methods.
Okay, what about the regulators themselves? Are agencies like the FDA keeping pace with these, pretty rapid changes in manufacturing tech?
That's a really important question. They're definitely paying close attention. They're actively working on establishing clear frameworks for how they'll evaluate and approve drugs made using these newer technologies.
So the rules might need tweaking.
Well, the fundamental principles, safety, efficacy, consistent quality, those don't change. But how you demonstrate things like process validation or your control strategy might look a bit different for a modular or continuous setup compared to a traditional batch process.
Right.
The existing rules, like good manufacturing practices, GMP, and the detailed requirements and regulations like CFR Title 21, Parts 210 and 211, they still absolutely apply. They cover facilities, equipment, controls. But applying them in these new contexts needs careful thought and sometimes adaptation.
So it sounds like a bit of a learning curve for everyone involved in industry and regulators working together.
I think that's fair to say. It's about embracing the potential of these powerful new tools while ensuring we maintain the absolute highest standards for quality and patient safety. That's always the bottom line.
Well, this has been genuinely fascinating, a real deep dive into where drug manufacturing seems to be heading. It feels like we're on the cusp of some really big
I
changes.
think we are. The potential for, major efficiency gains, better quality products, and just a more agile, responsive pharma industry. It's immense.
So as we wrap this up, what's maybe one final thought you'd want to leave our listeners mulling over about all this?
Okay, well, consider this. As these advanced manufacturing technologies, continuous, modular, all of it become more common,
Hmm.
how might that ultimately reshape not just how medicines are produced, but also who gets access to them and at what cost?
Mm.
The potential ripple effects on the future of healthcare access and affordability, they're profound and definitely something worth thinking about.
That is a powerful thought to end on. Thanks so much for walking us through all that today. Really appreciate it.